welcome everyone to the webinar that we're running today. It's on asbestos in the UK. It's developing a strategy to tackle the UK's biggest workplace killer. And on that, I'm joined by a fantastic panel. So I have Andrew Paten from the UK National Asbestos Register KIC, or UKNAR, who are currently doing a investment raise on the Ethex platform. I've just been joined by Liz Darlison, MBE, who's arrived in the nick of time, and she's the CEO from the charity Mesothelioma UK. I've got Mavis BEM, President of the Mavis Foundation, and I have Robin Bennett, who's Director of Start Software. My name's Josh Brewer. I'm the Business Development Manager at Ethex. And today, we've got this great panel, and I think what we're going to do is just really explore, the scope of the issue around asbestos and some of the shocking statistics relating to that. Highlight the human and financial costs and get some of the, maybe the human side of that as well, but also explore what the main challenges are in tackling the asbestos problem and meet the people who we've got here who are hopefully pioneering change in that. So just start off, I need to do a bit of housekeeping to start off. So the aim of the session is to draw on the knowledge and experience of the panel, get insights on how we might collaborate to tackle this problem. This isn't a financial promotion, it's important to say that, and we can't answer any questions about individual circumstances. We've got a chat function, and if anyone's got questions throughout, just please post them in the chat. We'll try and work them into the conversation, or if we can't do that, then we'll answer them at the end. Hopefully we'll have time for all of the questions, but if there isn't, we can do follow-up with some answers afterwards, after the event as well. And just to let everyone know that we are recording the session. We'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel and website, so you'll be able to watch it again or share it, and we'll send a follow-up email with links to any resources we might discuss. We should be aiming to go for about 45 minutes or thereabouts, depending on how the conversation goes. But I think at that point, let's get started. So I think what would be really useful actually is if I could just get an intro from each of our panelists, just find out who you are, what your organisation does, and how you've been working with UKNAR as well. And Liz, can I start with you, please? Hi, Liz, can you hear me? Okay, I'm not sure Liz can hear me at the moment. Mavis, do you want to start off?
Right, so I'm Mavis I raised the Mavis Foundation because I wanted to give back to the NHS, who've given me 13 extra years. And if it wasn't for research, I wouldn't be here because I was given 3 months. We're raising money for a Meso UK nurse, which is here in the East Kent, because of all the treatment I was given at Canterbury, I wanted to make sure that we do have a Meso UK nurse, because we didn't at the time, and it's lovely to be able to talk to someone that really knows and understands the disease. I met up with Andrew because because of the barcode system. I just so believe in it that it should be on every building. I would like to see it on every house, because a home is also a workplace. So that's why I'm here. Yeah.
No, thanks for that, Mavis. I think it's really useful to get that perspective of someone with lived experience as well. I think that adds a lot of value. Yeah. Robin, if I could go over to you.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so I'm Robin Bennett. I'm a director here at Start Software, and we're the company behind the Alpha Tracker asbestos software product. We've been producing software for asbestos consultancies and business managers, business owners, facilities managers for 15 years or so, I guess. And our software manages asbestos in about 4 million buildings. So I think we're the UK market leading in asbestos software. I never thought I'd hear myself say that phrase. Who ever thought you'd end up creating asbestos software? But my team here, we're based in the Midlands. We've got a wealth of experience in the process of how asbestos is located in buildings, risk assessed, analysed, and then the whole process of how asbestos is then managed from that point to be as safe as possible.
Okay, thanks, Robin. And Andrew, over to you.
Yes, well, I'm a co-founder, CEO of UKNAR, as we call it, UK National Asbestos Register. And basically, it's our belief that working collaboratively with people like the members of our panel today and using today's technology, it is possible to prevent many thousands of asbestos exposures. And in doing so, that will save many thousands of people the potential suffering of diseases like mesothelioma and potentially hundreds and thousands of deaths too. So that's kind of why we set up, and we're set up as a social enterprise so we can work collaboratively with lots of people to help achieve that mission in the UK.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And unfortunately, we're still waiting for Liz to dial in. Hopefully, she'll be able to get a connection. But in the meanwhile, I think it'd be useful just to get your perspective from each of the panelists on the kind of the scope of the asbestos problem and the size of it. And I know that actually there has been a parliamentary inquiry taking place. And Andrew, did you say that you were watching some of that?
Yes, I was watching some of that, and I do hope that Liz can join us, because actually she was one of the people requested to submit to the inquiry yesterday, and I don't want to steal her thunder on there, but I think it's worth pointing out that the fundamental reason that there was an inquiry is because there has been pressure put from people who understand that the issues of asbestos have not gone away in a way that anybody had hoped. So that's why, with a lot of work, an inquiry has been pressured, if you like, to be a bit of pressure put on the Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons, to conduct that inquiry. And that's all because, frankly, things haven't gone the way people intended or expected it to do. So we think there are better ways of doing things. Everybody does, I think, safe to say.
Yeah. Hi, Liz. Are you with us?
Yeah, apologies. Sorry, I'm having a few network issues. I've had to, I'm not in my office and I'm not at home.
All right.
And so I'm a bit challenged technically, but I'm with you. So
yeah, you're here.
Yeah,
that's what matters.
Yeah, apologies for the delay.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. Liz, do you want to just give a little, quick intro on yourself and your organisation?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you very much. So apologies everybody that I'm late. My name is Liz Darlison. I'm from Mesothelioma UK, which is the national charity for mesothelioma. And we've been working in partnership with Andrew and team with this initiative for some time. Part of our brief as a charity dedicated to people with mesothelioma is to do everything we can to prevent future cases. And this is definitely one wheel, one cog in our armoury, really, to addressing that. I should also say that I am a consultant nurse working in the NHS, and I do work exclusively with people with mesothelioma. But my main focus is leading the charity, Mesothelioma UK.
But loads of experience around asbestos and the impacts there.
Yeah,
and actually,
sadly.
Just before you came on, actually, we were talking about the parliamentary inquiry, and I think I'm right in saying that you were actually at that inquiry yesterday. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So the Work and Pensions Committee convened an inquiry, and there were 8 of us that were witnesses. So I was one of the witnesses on that. I think that we left an impression, and I'm really hopeful that, and to be absolutely fair, I'm sorry I've missed out on the conversation previously, but having this kind of technology that is proposed as part of UKNAR was discussed at length yesterday during that, for those of you that missed it. So we're really positive, really hopeful that there's going to be a national push now. Not just all carrot, there'll be some stick, hopefully, behind it.
It's important to have that as well, isn't it? And I think
definitely.
Mavis, if I go over to you, I think obviously Liz has got that sort of first-hand experience, but you also have that first-hand experience of the impact of asbestos and mesothelioma.
Well, yes, I have mesothelioma. I was given 3 months to live 13 years ago, but sadly, there's been so many people die in between times. So I do run the Meso Warriors on Facebook, and it's very, very sad that I keep having to put up light a candle for when they die. So it is devastating. But I think Liz brought up such a good point yesterday, that we're losing children, we're losing in their 20s and 30s also. You know, it has to be from schools. And Liz really did fight the case yesterday really well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavis.
That's all right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that you know, what you do really brings home the reality of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Robin, if I just turn to you on your sort of view on the sort of scale of the problem, I suppose you see it kind of maybe seeing it from a macro level, aren't you, with the data that you collect?
I think we are. Over the years that we've been producing asbestos software, we've captured more than 50 million items of data about asbestos in buildings in our systems. We were we've always been involved with innovation. We're a software company. This is something I've talked to Andrew about at length, and we were the first people to introduce handheld surveying. So rather than people going out with clipboards and cameras, you know, as they were 20 years ago, we introduced the idea of smartphones being used by surveyors to capture information. But over that, even since that time, like I say, it's more than 50, we've got more than 50 million items of data in this space, which shows the scale of the problem. And I think people may not realize, I think it's still true to say that there are more people becoming ill and dying now with asbestos related diseases than there ever were, even though, you know, it's not been a product that's been used in new builds or even in refurbs for decades. But the problem is getting worse, not better. And it's because as you say, it's one part of the problem is actually to locate the asbestos. That's what our software does, and help people to analyze the risk and manage it safely. But then it's all about making people aware of where that asbestos is, especially if you're a contractor working in a building. You know, you need to know where asbestos is to be able to work safely as a plumber, as an electrician, as a builder. And this is where the technology or the idea that Andrew's and his colleagues have had really comes into play.
Yeah, so if I move over to you, Andrew, then, and just in talking about how you can kind of integrate this various, you know, data and IT approaches to find a way to help manage the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Robin said was entirely right. There's a vast amount of asbestos in the UK estate, about 1 in 5 workplaces. So it's all around us, whether we know it or not. It's in about 1 million homes. It's in, I think Liz said it's over 90% of hospitals, and it's over 75% of schools. So it is all around us. And the trouble is people don't know where it is. So asbestos, if it's disturbed in particular, then it releases the fibers which you inhale. And if you inhale enough of the wrong type of fibers, then that's where you end up with mesothelioma. So, and it's all very well saying to people, don't disturb asbestos, but if you don't let them know that it's in their buildings and you don't know where it is, how are you going to avoid asbestos actually being disturbed? The great news is, theoretically, in systems like Robin was talking about, we have 80–90% of the data. But the problem is, the best way I can put it is there's just widespread ignorance on the one hand. Not many, for example, I'll go to schools. Teachers are meant to know whether they have asbestos in their schools or not, so that they don't disturb it or not at risk of disturbing it. And it would help if they knew that, particularly in schools, quite a dynamic environment. We know from survey after survey that less than 50% of teachers actually know whether they've got asbestos in the school, let alone where it is if it's in their classroom. So we know that this ignorance, there's just widespread ignorance at all levels, whether it's the duty holders in some cases, who are the people responsible, or the people, contractors going on site. It's a vast problem. Contractors are meant to be trained. Well, we know that about 300,000 of them get awareness training per year, but there are 3 million contractors. So that's only 10% of the people that ought to be. So you've got this massive ignorance that's right across there. And of course, if they're not getting information, what you get is you get indifference at best and inactivity at worst, or actually worse, you get destructive activity, which is what actually happens out there. And people just go about their day-to-day doing their job unaware, and that's what we're trying to change. And you know, it's not rocket science, but it does require a lot of collaboration. That's the thing. This little device here has made the difference to the whole world, but there's so much of it out there. We've got to collaborate.
Yeah, and if you just very briefly tell you how can you use a mobile phone then in order to identify where the risk from asbestos might lie?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, every building that has asbestos in or has been located has produced something called an asbestos register, which shows where that information, so which shows where the asbestos is related. And what we do is we find that document from them, which may or may not be an easy thing to do. We make sure that we upload it into our database. We make sure it's in a friendly, readable format so that you can read it on a mobile phone. And the way you access that document is scanning a QR code, which we don't have to explain to anybody anymore post-COVID, which we did have to explain before. You read it on a QR code, on a notice, preferably, it's not the only place, but on a notice, ideally in reception, where you can actually then see what's involved. And I think Mavis has got the story because of her son being a fire alarm engineer, precisely how useful that is and what actually happens in practice.
Well, it was yesterday. I was talking to him, telling him I was going to do this Zoom today, and he said he works in Regent Street on a property where it's rented out to in rooms and that, and it's very, very posh, he said. And he went into a room that's painted grey, and he scraped the wall with his ladder. And he went back and found the site manager and said, "I'm ever so sorry I've done that." He said, "Oh my God," he said, "that is the asbestos room." He said, "What do you mean that's the asbestos room?" He said, "Well, all the rooms that are painted grey are asbestos rooms." So he said, "But that's not on the survey there. It's not, And he said, "No," he said, "but that's what it is." He said, "There's a label in there," and he found a little tiny label, no bigger than a stamp, that said asbestos. So there he is, And he also, because he does the smoke detectors, he takes them down, and he said the white powder's in there. Wow. And he said the engineers blow that out. So yeah, all the time, it's very serious. He can't wait to see this barcode on the front that I keep talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's exactly that gives you exactly a sort of real life example of why it's so important to have a easily accessible system like this. But I mean, just Andrew, just very quickly, conscious that we've been talking to you a bit, but just one more question around this: who pays for it?
Well, the person who has a responsibility for managing asbestos safely in the building is called a duty holder, by and large. That's what they're known in law, and it is their responsibility, and they're the people who pay. But they don't pay a lot of money. This isn't about lots of very expensive IT systems. This is about them paying a couple of £100 a year, roughly. Sometimes it's some larger buildings, it goes up to maybe £400 or £500 a year for us to have this information, make it available, work with the consultants and the IT systems to make sure that it's all there. So in the scheme of running a building, it's peanuts. But in the scheme of actually the cost of an asbestos disturbance, just in money, a small asbestos disturbance costs you thousands of pounds to clean up. And in terms of administration, this is quite an important thing. All duty holders know they're meant to get this information to the right people, but they don't currently do that. And therein lies a problem. So it saves that administration, or it makes that administration a lot easier. And there's other ways of saving. If someone turns up to a job and says, "I can't find the asbestos register," we know the hospital couldn't do a project for three weeks. Why? Because the only person who knew where the asbestos register actually was when everyone turned up was on holiday before, and they couldn't contact him. And that must have cost them a fortune. So, it saves money all round, as well as the obvious benefits of lives and livelihoods.
Yeah, and I suppose on that, Liz, if I turn to you as someone who, who's also involved in the frontline care, and in terms of that, talking about these impacts of when we don't manage the asbestos problem, I suppose you see that firsthand, don't you? Hello, Liz. Well, I think Liz might have frozen up a little bit there. Okay. If I just move on to a slightly different question then. Why is it important to, I mean, in terms of working with UCNAR, is it important that it is a kick, Robin? Does that change the kind of commercial dynamic a little bit? The fact that they are set up with this sort of asset lock in place and a sort of community focus.
I think it probably does. There are lots of, these are conversations I've had a lot with Andrew. There are a lot of interested parties in asbestos, the industry, if I can call it that. So there are lots of asbestos consultancies who are the people who have field workers going out there and actually finding the asbestos, and they're making a living from that process. There are the duty holders, as Andrew described, the people who actually have the buildings and need to make that information available to contractors and employees and other people who need to attend the site. So a lot of stakeholders involved, and I think having the UKNAR initiative with that community ethical focus means that hopefully that all of the stakeholders, all of the companies like us, I mean, that we're one of the software providers. There are other companies like us in the same space. All of the stakeholders hopefully can contribute and feel like they can contribute without fighting the sort of the commercial aspects of the arrangements, if it was a strictly commercial proposition that was being put forward. So I think it is very important that it has that community, social, ethical focus, because I'm certainly hoping, I mean, we're very supportive of Andrew's initiative. We think it's a very good idea for the industry. I have Mavis, a friend of mine 2 years ago, passed away unfortunately with me. So he was in fact our closest neighbour. So this story's touched us as a family, as well as sort of my business being involved with asbestos. But I'm hoping that with this social enterprise aspect of what's being proposed, that all of the stakeholders, all of the commercial stakeholders, everybody who is still making a living in some way, about making asbestos safe, will feel that they can contribute and support this initiative like we are here at Start Software.
Yeah, and that maybe coming at from the sort of like a foundation aspect, did you find it easier working with UKNAR because they're a kind of, in some ways they've got a similar format to yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, the format really is that they care. There's so many people that are actually behind us on this asbestos route that we're on, and so Andrew and I really sort of found him so easy to talk to, and yes, I back him. I love to back him. It's a tool that is so needed. It'd be up-to-date surveys and that is where it's wrong. There'd be a survey. My son walks in and he asks at the reception, and they sort of hunt through cupboards trying to find it, or it's in another office somewhere. So it'd be there on the wall.
That's a really important point you're making there, Mavis. When I first came into this industry, probably nearly 20 years ago, the typical answer you'd get from a building manager, if you said, "Where's your asbestos register?" is either they didn't have one, or they would go to a shelf, look for a folder, flick through the folder and find something. And you might find that register was 3 or 4 or 5 years old. Yeah. And of course, the issue is, and this is a really, really critical issue for Andrew and his colleagues to solve, is that a register, as soon as it's produced, it's essentially out of date. Yeah. Because works happen to a room. It's like Mavis, you were talking about the rooms being painted grey to indicate they had asbestos. Well, what happens if someone repaints the room the next day, or paints another room grey because they want that room to be grey? So things change all the time in a building, as we know. The use of rooms changes, for example. So as soon as really the report's been produced or a register's been produced, it's not a static document. And a challenge that Andrew's team, I know, are going to solve is that issue of dynamically having the most up-to-date information available on the QR code. Yeah. And as long as Andrews and his team, and I'm sure they will solve this problem, as long as they can solve that problem to ensure that it's always the latest information that's presented, then this truly will be a revolution in the industry, I think. And so, I think that's a very good point. It's not about just making a document that perhaps is a year old or 2 years old or 3 years old available. It's making sure that it's a current information and it's absolutely up to date. But I know you're on working on that, Andrew, aren't you, with your colleagues?
And with you guys, and with the help people with you guys too. I think the interesting thing that we've had on the school side of things was, as these multi-academy trusts that we're working with, is they have, as we have gently challenged them and suggested there might be better ways of doing things, they've begun to look at what they've got And they've realized in many cases, I would say between 35 and 50% of the time, they've realized that they've got stuff that is out of date. And that is good, because then they realize they need to do something about it. So that is one of the key benefits of this. As people realize there's a better way of doing things, they start looking at it. And I think that'll make a big difference out there. I'm very sure of that.
Hi, Liz, welcome back. I think we got Liz, have we got you back now?
Yeah.
Hiya, Liz.
I do
If Liz, maybe if you turn your camera off, we'll just have you on vocal, if that would be all right. That might help. So we have had a question come in. Okay, sorry, Liz, you're breaking up a bit. I'm afraid we can't really hear you. Sorry about that. So we have had a question come in, actually from a retired medical
This is all very apt, actually, isn't it? Talking about
Technically,
up-to-date information. We're looking at Liz as she was like 3 minutes ago.
And it cut off halfway through. So.
Right. Okay. So we have had a question come in, which is from a retired medical officer from Environmental Health in Leeds, which apparently Leeds has sent asbestos all over the world. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well done.
But so the question is should insurance companies only insure buildings that are on the asbestos register? Robin, I'll pass that on to you to start.
Okay, try again. Try once more, and then
I'll just wait and see if Liz caught up with us.
She's gone mute, so.
Okay. It's a really good question. It's a really good question from, was it Martin? Yeah. Thanks, yeah. Martin, for that question. I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a really good point. I don't know. I wish you hadn't asked me that one, Josh.
Apologies.
That's a very, that's a really tough question. I don't know. I think it's fair to say there are other ways to do what UKNAR are proposing, and it's like there's not one tool to fix every problem. I think every company, certainly by law, needs to know where its asbestos is. That's point number one. Secondly, they need to make that information available to the right people. That's point number two, the point that Andrew's already made. So I think, yeah, it's a reasonable question to ask insurance companies. Where do you have an asbestos register? Is it up to date? Is it available? I think the solution that UKNAR are proposing here will certainly make that very straightforward for people to do. And Andrew and his team have been very capable, very able to promote their solution. And I think that awareness is really important. So I think it'll be very difficult for people to say they don't know how to do this once the UKNAR system is up and running and available. I think that's the point, Andrew, isn't it? It's going to be difficult for someone to say they didn't understand there was a problem they had to solve and where the solution was.
Yes, and I think I have spoken with one of the leading insurers, and they are interested, as it happens, but not quite. They're unlikely from an insurance point of view. They measure things by various sort of risks. They're actually quite worried about all the tradesmen coming in, and they insure. This particular one insures an awful lot of the tradespeople. So the insurance business is an interesting industry. I have looked into it. What they've really done is they put so many billions of pounds aside, they're desperately hoping that'll cover it. That's what they've really done. And they worry about other things, to be honest, at the moment, because they put, and it is many, many billions of pounds aside. And so they're hoping, well, I hope that's done. Next problem, climate change.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm just Liz, I'm just trying to get a bit of a clarification on that question. So I'm just going to stick that back to Martin, actually, whether that was liability insurance or building insurance that we're talking about there. Andrew, earlier you touched on the fact that you're working with a lot of academy trusts and a lot of schools, and I guess I just wanted to maybe push that across the panel. Is that is that a good place to start, Mavis, if you're thinking about where you target?
I think it's the best place to start, and Parliament did yesterday, really, even they brought it up. Yeah, it is the best place because they are the youngsters, you know, growing up, they're our future. And there we are, you know, they've got asbestos all around them. They only have to bang a wall and they're breathing in asbestos fibres. You could go on with where they're getting the fibres from. So yes, I mean, a ceiling fell down. There's the asbestos. They say leave it in situ, but those accidents happen even when it's left in situ. So yeah, I think it's the best place to start. And then it brings it home to everybody. I think then asbestos will be on everyone's mouth, and you know that they'll be speaking it, and then they'll start looking at their own homes. That's where I want them to look, their own homes. Yeah. I mean, we do DIY, we pull out fireplaces, and there's the asbestos. So yeah, the quicker we get that done.
No, exactly. And I suppose, I mean, Robin, in terms of the organisations you deal with, you know, you seeing, is there a big, I mean, presumably there is this huge need in basically the sort of the state infrastructure, so hospitals, schools, those kind of places,
absolutely.
MOD, Ministry of Defence.
Absolutely, yeah. We regularly analyse our data, given that we have such this enormous database of asbestos information. We regularly analyse it for all sorts of reasons, actually, to make sure that surveyors are consistent between each other in how they analyse things, and companies are consistent, and what's the most common types of asbestos that are found and in what situations. So we're constantly looking at the data, and our analysis supports Andrew's analysis of where asbestos is found, you know, and the proportions of schools and the proportions of hospitals and things. I think it's a fascinating point that Mavis has made there, because I think, you know, outside of the asbestos industry and outside possibly the building industry and sort of tradespeople, I don't think people really still understand what asbestos is. I think people think it's a poison perhaps, or toxic, or, you know, or radioactive even. It's not, I don't think it's well known what the danger actually is, you know, the danger of breathing the fibers and then you know, becoming ill sometime afterwards. So I think if schools had a better awareness, teachers had a better awareness, children then would have a better awareness of what it actually was and what the danger was, then that's sure to move up through society in general. I think that's a fantastic point that you've made there, Mavis, and that obviously Liz was talking about yesterday in the parliamentary inquiry. So yeah, I mean, schools are a great place to start. And I know Andrew's been very successful with his communication to schools. And Andrew, I've been talking to some of our consultant clients today about this and about today's webinar and about what you've been doing, and almost all of them had come into contact with you and your organization through schools, through academies and multi-academy trusts. So I think that's an area that you've obviously been very successful in sort of getting the message out there.
I think it'd be great if Liz could speak, because she was at Parliament yesterday, but I think there's lots of good reasons for schools. But can we just see if we can get Liz to speak, because it was such a big part yesterday, the parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah, I can hear everything, Andrew, and I
we can hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear everything, and I think I mean, the Airtight and Asbestos campaign has been focused very much on schools for a variety of reasons, not least because we have certainty about the presence of asbestos, we know about the vulnerability of children, and you know, I think it has to be, above all else, the most worthy area for us to start. But asbestos in hospitals, and 94% of hospitals contain asbestos. So I'd like to see a lot broader. I think schools are a great place to start. I think we know exactly who the duty holders are. They don't always know who they are, but we should know who they are. So I think that schools are a great place to start, but I'd like to see all public buildings focused on.
Absolutely. I hope we did hear you, Liz. Yeah. We got you there, which is great.
And can I say, I think Liz makes a very good point about the public buildings and hospitals in particular. The reason we chose schools was lots of very, very good reasons, and kind of is the priority. But we did switch from NHS Trust before the pandemic came along, and indeed I'm back in conversation now with some of them, because it is all about, I'm afraid it's a little bit like Grenfell too at some level. The greatest risks to the greatest number of people, tradespeople obviously, but it's all about the buildings with the greatest number of people in them, with that were built at the wrong time. And our public sector was built in the 60s and 70s. So that's where all the asbestos is. So and they contain large numbers of people. And those buildings are getting worse, as was pointed out in yesterday's parliamentary inquiry, not better. So they're getting more dangerous rather than safer. So that is why the focus really needs to be, as Liz says, not really just schools. I think they're a great place to start because they're the highest risk. They give us profile out there, but really we should be focused very much on all those ancient public sector buildings where the asbestos has been in there for 60, 70 years and the condition is getting worse.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why, you know, basically in order to roll out the solution that you've got is that's why you've done a raise on Ethex, which has been really successful. I mean, you had original target of 275,000. I think you've already got to 375,000, and you can push through and put another 100,000 onto that. And I was just, so with that additional monies, how would you see the UCNAR using those additional monies?
Well, roughly, and this is a little bit crude, but the way I look at it is that for any, what I would call any key segment, so let's take schools, for example, let's take housing associations where we've just got quite a lot of interest over the course of the last 3 weeks as it happens. Let's take NHS trusts. What there is to properly develop in those segments, I'm going to be a bit glib and say it costs about 100,000. So every 100,000 allows you to develop properly in a particular segment. That's a combination of actual research that's really required, getting to understand the networks involved, sales and marketing, and understanding the IT systems that are involved, and then working through the connections that are required there. So roughly speaking, I'm looking at the moment, we set 275,000 and that allowed us to work with 2 key segments. I think we're going to be adding 2 more if we get the funds in, one of which is housing associations. I think is very likely from what I've got, and I'm rather hopeful that the NHS will be the next one. So that's how we're looking at it. And you don't get your money back in year 1, so you have to invest up front. We don't get it back straight away.
Yep. No, I totally understand that. I'm conscious of time. We've actually managed to, fill nearly the full 45 minutes there. It's been a fascinating conversation, I've got to say. I guess I'd just like to finish off and just go around to each of the panelists, and if you could just quickly give me your vision, for how can we get to where we need to be in relation to asbestos? What do you see that looking like? Maybe Liz, could I start with you?
Yeah, so just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Yeah, good-o. So I was really interested in the select committee yesterday to hear about France and their long-term plan. And I think to get to where we need to be as a country, we need to wake up and smell the coffee and see the devastating effect our asbestos legacy is having day in and day out. And I think we need to have a government initiated national task force from across every part of the asbestos and community to create a long-term 4-5-decade plan to rid us of asbestos, so that our children's grandchildren, perhaps, or our children's grandchildren will no longer have to consider that they may be diagnosed with mesothelioma.
Thanks, Liz. I mean, I think that's really giving it the sort of like the macro view, isn't it? And Mavis, what's your sort of vision or hope? Or
I think collaboration is important. We must communicate. Asbestos is in our world for a long time to come, and the cost alone to remove it is so high. But where are we going to bury it? You can't keep burying it to leave it for the future to dig up again. So it starts contaminating the soil anyway. We have got to get people round the table, and it's good to talk.
Great. And Robin, over to you.
So my hope, my vision would be that the QR codes that Andrew's initiative will get onto the front of buildings and into reception areas and whatever, that will enable people to see live asbestos registers. So not just a copy of a report that was done 2 or 3 years ago, but actually the current situation at that building as it is known, best known today, so that people working there will have the most up-to-date information possible.
Right, and then Andrew, if I could just get you to finish off there. You're on mute, Andrew.
I'm with Liz on this. I'd rather not exist. In the nicest possible way. What we want is it's going to take 30, 40 years. So we want a plan that allows us to do that. And it would be helpful if we had data to work out what the scale of it is and how we might do it in an intelligent way. So for example, with schools, we know there's at least 3,000 high-risk schools. Let's focus on that, but we don't even know who they are. We haven't got that. So let's use the data to get a prioritized plan. And meanwhile, we have to manage it safely. So let's just let as many people have this information that need to have it as simply and easily as possible. And I think today's tech can do it cheaply.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? Collaboration and providing a cheap solution, and then hopefully then you can, by pulling together, we should be able to solve the problem. Okay, I know. As I say, I'm conscious of time. I found that a really informative session for me. I didn't know half of the areas that we've covered today. I'm really impressed with the insight and wisdom of the panel, so thank you for that. I'd just like to say that the UCNAR offer is still live on the Ethex platform, but it's only for a few more days. So I'd encourage people, if you are interested, go and take a look and read through the documents and see what you think. But I'd just like to finish off to say thank you to Liz. I'm really sorry we couldn't get you in properly on, Liz, but what you did put in was fantastic. To Mavis, to Andrew, and to Robin, thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much to everyone who's watched and tuned in and posted questions, and see you later. All right, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye everybody, thank you.